With the recent changes and politicalizing in the realm of education, there is little doubt that teachers and students are still reeling with the storms that buffet their classrooms. While many of these changes benefit students, such as increased rigor in the classroom, there are still areas of concern that require attention. President Obama, along with his cabinet members, decided that one solution to the educational turmoil would be the creation and immediate application of national standards. Before the creation of the national standards, each state was responsible for creating and implementing their own standards. In theory, this is a good idea, to have a set of standards that all students are responsible for mastering. However, the new standards de-emphasized creative and fictional literature in favor of STEM. One major area of concern is the inclusion or exclusion of literature in the classroom as a standard of practice. Since the new standards were introduced in 2009, there has been a constant stream of questions about what should qualify as a standard. Currently, the Alabama College and Career Readiness Standards do not include a specific standard utilizing regional texts. I believe that this is a mistake we should address. The reading of regional texts will help students better understand their own cultural identity as well as grow an appreciation for the evolution of regional language. Current college and career readiness standards were born out of a national necessity. There is a growing demand for students fresh out of high school to be able to compete on a global level. This has proven to be a bigger problem than was originally anticipated. According to the U.S. Department of Education, today about a third of American students require remedial education when they enter college, and current college attainment rates are not keeping pace with our country's projected workforce needs. The government knew that altering state standards would be difficult, but it was a necessary pain for the betterment of student comprehension. In addition to the new standards, there are new state and national tests that assess how well teachers are performing and how well students are comprehending the new changes. According to federal policy, rigorous standards and assessments will also help parents and communities to determine the areas in which their schools need to improve and the areas in which they are thriving. Most important, strong standards help ensure that students receive coherent preparation that align with the demands of the real world. While all the changes are for the betterment of students, there is one major flaw. None of the new and improved standards take regional history and subsequently regional literature into consideration. It is important to note the difference between Common Core state standards and college and career readiness standards. The CCRS are a branch of the CCSS. When the CCSS was implemented in 2009, there were two specific pathways created. College and career readiness standards were created for the secondary level, and grade-specific standards were created for the elementary. The standards were created to help students become the best possible candidates for the 21st century classroom and workforce. Research suggests that these skills include critical thinking and problem-solving skills, collaboration, communication, and creativity and innovation. The CCRS are basically a set of guidelines used to create a more specific, more in-depth, more language-friendly set of standards for teachers to use every day. It is an equally important factor to note that Common Core is not curriculum. The U.S. Department of Education was very clear from the beginning of the process that they wanted the state and systems to choose how the standards are taught. By allowing teachers and administrators the liberty of choosing how to teach the standards, they are given a sense of freedom. Many teachers are grateful for this small liberty in their communities. For example, my previous department chairs and administrative teams have supported every change to curriculum I have made, as long as the changes are upheld by the standards. In the past 2 years, I've had my students participate in an independent reading assignment. Since I cannot create tests tailored to each independent novel, I instead create project-based assessments. While this is not a traditional format of testing, it does meet the standards required. It is a well-known fact in education that students will only invest in readings that they either can connect with or that they find value in. Many teachers are already including regional texts in their classrooms. However, by adding regional texts to the CCRS, both students and teachers benefit from the protection offered by the standards. James Callan, an English professor at Indiana University of Pennsylvania, argues that reading regional or hometown literature creates a relationship between the author and those reading the texts. Callan defines hometown authors as ones who not only grew up in a hometown, but wrote about them. They need not have been born there for that place to be central to his or her upbringing and writing. Additionally, he argues that the social construction of regional literature can be reflective of not only the author, but also the audience. Callan remarks how identity can be discovered through the exploring of the history of an area, and regional texts can help students find this connection. It is easy to forge straight past the background and history of an author and jump right into the themes and symbols of their work. A true grasp of a literary work is exposed when the author is as well understood as the text. By reading regional texts that directly relate to their region of America, students are more likely to develop the skills needed to foster a problem solving mindset. This directly supports the overall goal of the CCRS to create students who can fulfill the needs of a 21st century classroom and workforce. Moreover, this 21st century mindset must include a sense of cultural identity, awareness, and appreciation. Teachers around the country are beginning to recognize this need for change. For example, Theon Smith, an associate professor at the University of Tampa, and Angela Hansen, an assistant professor at the Northern Arizona University, have collaborated to create lesson plans that promote student collaboration through American short stories. While these researchers are focusing on American literature as a whole, it is easy to make the leap into regional texts. By reading stories specific to a student's corner of a world, they are more likely to be able to empathize with their fellow classmates while also learning from the mistakes of those who lived before them. When trying to help students connect to literature, students often employ tactics that help students relate to the characters or themes within a text. While this is a successful maneuver, there are whole sections of text lost. By showing students they can connect their social lives to another person, they begin to make independent connections to outside of the classroom. James Callan remarks how identity can be discovered through the exploring of the history of an area, and regional texts can help students find this connection. Part of a person is defined by their place of origin. Part of who we are is determined by where we are from and where we are now. Reading regional texts provides students with opportunities to evaluate the issues in their region and create newer and better solutions. Callan uses the term hometown literature instead of the more traditional regional literature. His definition of hometown literature is more encompassing, covering not only the location of the stories, but also the areas where the author was born and where they were raised. By widening to this general definition of hometown literature, Callan is able to include authors who have lived in a place, who have been to a place, and who now live in a place. Callan argues that there are at least three specific reasons for studying hometown literature. First, it helps students understand how social context affects the production of literature. The history of the authors, many times, are as fascinating as the stories they tell. By examining their individual worlds, students are introduced to a new kind of individualized history. Second, teaching hometown literature also helps students better understand their own identities. This concept of finding self in literature is not new. However, it is more important now than ever before for students to find themselves in the place where they physically live. If they are not invested in changing the future of their homes, then no one will. Last, it deepens student knowledge about their own hometowns. Students have to be taught how to take pride in what connects them to their homes and what makes their hometown unique. Through regional literature, this connection can be easily made. Additionally, Neil Gaiman has recently discussed the value of reading for both knowledge and pleasure. The overarching theme in his book, The View from the Cheap Seats, is how we must take an active role in reestablishing the value of reading. He states, fiction can show you a different world. It can take you somewhere you've never been. Once you've visited other worlds, you can never be entirely content with the world that you grew up in. And discontent is a good thing. People can modify and improve their worlds, leave them better, leave them different if they're discontent. Reading can make the reader uncomfortable, and it is only through that discomfort that change can begin to happen. One of the real beauties of literature is in its ability to transcend space and time. By understanding what has happened in their regional areas, students have a better foundation for creating the change their community needs. Teachers are some of the greatest investors in community. Every day, secondary education teachers come in contact with between 80 and 130 children. With this level of impact, it is important for teachers to stay up to date on the new practices in their given fields. The National Council of Teachers of English, for example, publishes articles written by English teachers for English teachers. Wilkins and Kiddo are two such teachers that wrote an article about cultural diversity in the classroom. The article argues that diversity in the classroom is a great mixing of experiences and ideas that can lead to serious problem solving conversations. However, diversity in the classroom can also lead to misunderstandings and hurt feelings. It is the privilege and responsibility of the English language arts classroom teacher to develop a curriculum that satisfies the need for a diverse classroom. It calls for teachers to evaluate their own bias and use that information as a starting point for inclusion. When students can connect to characters, settings, or themes on a personal level, they are more inclined to commit to what the stories should be teaching them. These stories, in turn, can change how students feel about their own cultural identities. For example, a teacher interviewed by Wilkins and Kiddo commented that by using literature that students can relate to on an intimate level, he felt that they grew in their own empathy. Literature is a powerful tool for understanding human experience. When reading a book, a student can feel the emotions of loneliness, love, patriotism, or fear. Students need texts they can relate to both emotionally and physically. While the CCRS encourages the reading of varied text, the use of regional text has the potential to meet students where they are intellectually. Choosing texts with settings, characters, or themes that students can directly see in their personal worlds, teachers are cracking open the door to the world of literature. Students must feel that a teacher is investing in them directly before they are willing to invest in themselves. Shannon Burns and Lewis Burns similarly argue that by exposing students to different types of English, teachers are creating opportunities for students to practice empathy. The varying types of English also give students a chance to evaluate their own language variants and practices. The authors also focus on the use of language in the classroom and the value of using ethnic and regional literature in conjunction with teaching composition. Their argument supports the claim that ethnic and regional literature makes students more comfortable with their own unique language. Burns and Burns provide a number of texts supporting the practice of regional literature, including Twain, Faulkner, Richard Wright, and Flannery O'Connor. By using these texts, teachers can show students how authors use words to create a cultural identity and show the progression of a specific regional language. They argue that by reading regional texts, students learn about themselves and can grow as writers. Once a student becomes aware that there are many kinds of American English, many kinds of accents and dialects, he begins to lose any self-consciousness he may feel about his own ability to use language. This stripping away of notions that his speech is in some way inferior can also be reinforced by an attention in the classroom to the way individual members of the class use language, as shown perhaps by the various ways that each student may translate any given passage. By using regional literature, students or teachers can help students become more comfortable with their own ability to use language in social and scholarly settings. Authors understand the significant impact their words have on generations. The CCRS fails to recognize the importance of regional authors can still play in the lives of students on a regular basis. Percival Everett was interviewed by Matthew Dissinger concerning Everett's novels and personal stance on the significance of Southern literature. He believes that the setting of a text plays a significant role in the understanding of the text. In addition to the importance of setting, he places value on writing about what you know. Since most writers write based on experience, it is logical to make the connection of origin to the setting of their novels. He argues that if an author does not embrace his region, then he is missing out on a gold mine of opportunities. This interview supports the argument that through regional literature, students can find their own identities. Everett states, any good literature has to be regional because it has to be set in a place. Since no one person can live or has lived everywhere, it is the responsibility of those who do live there to tell the story of that place. Regional literature is the imagined and historical representation of an area. This type of literature is particularly important because it tells the story of the oppressed as well as those who rose in society. Fictional literature is not bound to the same restrictive guidelines as what is recorded by history. The defeated man has a story, and literature is the method he uses to tell it. In Everett's interview, he discusses the value of writing on the local level. You can't write every man's story. You write a particular person's story who's from a particular place, who either lives there or is visiting another particular place. It is too much to assume that students will soak up the themes of Shakespeare and Dante without first allowing them to dip their toes into something with local color. Personally, the use of regional text has helped my students empathize more and come up with interesting solutions to local and national issues. With the recent creation and growing popularity of the Black Lives Matter movement, as well as the changes to those who sit in our political powerhouse, students in my area are asking a lot of questions about how things in the South have evolved and changed. Since history is written by the victor of an event, literature can and does offer the side of the broken. Students are taken aback when they realize that the language that they use daily can be found in regional literature. By using a combination of classic authors and modern authors with a sprinkling of nonfiction speeches and articles, I have been able to not only cover several standards, but give students a taste of regional hometown literature. For example, classics like The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn pull generations of students together in one all-encompassing story of growth, love, and change. This worthwhile story showcases the damages the southern states inflicted on themselves. While the language of the text has it on the banned book list, the morals keep it in the classroom. Huck and Jim both experience hardship and growth. Since Huck is a rebel in his own right, students find it easy to relate to his need for escape. The story also allows students to track the changes in Huck toward Jim. Their relationship represents so much of the tribulation and hard-won growth the South has experienced. The use of dialect by the characters create opportunity in the classroom to discuss both formal and informal language, as well as open discussion on how words have changed over time. While not all teachers will agree, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn is a timeless classic that invokes feelings of hardship and of home. Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird is a beautiful illustration of fictional texts that take on the big issues of the 1930s generation, which was full of turmoil and change. Lee's words are famous for transcending their 1960s publication and bringing forth some of the most powerful themes in literature. The text explores the complex themes of racism, poverty, discrimination, education, and cruelty. While not all themes are relevant to all children all the time, the text provides occasion for opening and honest discussions on uncomfortable topics. Since the story is written from the perspective of an adult reflecting on the events from her childhood, students are given the opportunity to write reflective pieces on of their own lives. Additionally, characters like Scout, Atticus, and Calpurnia are beautiful examples of classic archetypes. Lee created characters that would withstand the test of generations and teach children that they have the power to change lives. There are excellent nonfiction regional texts that help in the explanation of the gradual change the South experienced. For example, Letter from a Birmingham Jail by Martin Luther King, Jr. We study history in history texts because history tends to repeat. While 1963 seems like a long time ago, there are still those suffering because their rights are not respected. High school students are on the cusp of experiencing their civil rights fully, and it is a high school teacher's responsibility to teach them who helped secure those rights. Letter is a beautiful reminder of sharing love and peace while asking for justice. King outlines 4 points to attaining freedom while keeping the peace. Children need examples of adults who are making difficult choices without resorting to violence and without compromising what they believe in. King's letter is also an excellent example of pathos, logos, and ethos. Each of these things is essential in creating students who are capable of thinking critically and asking the kinds of questions that need answering. The overarching goal of the English language arts teacher is to help create students that are capable, empathetic, and resourceful. One way of aiding in this lifestyle change is by leading by example. By demonstrating this method of thinking, teachers give students the chance to grow and change. This altered perspective is developed not just through the reading of regional text, but through the deliberate and ensuing application of the discussion. Students are given the opportunity to identify with their culture and invest in their regional language through the reading of regional texts. Thank you.